So when I actually said yes, I'm ready to come to HBS, in my mind I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Cambridge, Boston for 2 years, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to be a program manager at my same company. That was my definition of success when I was coming in to HBS. And maybe that you can put this in as an answer later on too, but boy, did that change.
Hello, everyone. Today we have Mike Mancinelli on the podcast, and he drops so much advice and knowledge from his experience applying as a 2+2 candidate to HBS. We hope you enjoy the show. And if you do, please leave us a rating and review.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of How Did You Get In? Today, we have the honor of interviewing Michael Mancinelli, who is a fellow proud member of Section I, HBS class of 2021, along with Julia and me. Woo. Mike's background is in engineering, specifically a bachelor's in electrical engineering from Harvard. And yes, that does mean that Mike is a double Harvard guy, really part of that tip-top elite on paper, but I assure you he doesn't act like it at all. He managed to juggle both an engineering degree and play varsity football for Harvard as a member of the offensive line. And after graduating, he worked in the aerospace industry. So I'm sure will be very helpful in terms of how engineers can pitch themselves to MBA programs. Mike also came to school already married to his lovely wife, Jess, who was doing a grad program at Tufts at the same time as us. So maybe Mike can give us some tips on successfully balancing marriage and grad school. And finally, if Mike isn't impressive enough already, he also was a Baker Scholar at HBS, which means he was in the top 5% of our class. Obviously brilliant, but at the same time, very down to earth. And so we're so excited to have him with us on the pod today. So welcome, Mike.
I'm very happy to be here. Nice to see you guys.
Awesome.
Welcome. It's always amazing because you're such a down-to-earth person, and then you hear the entire list of accomplishments, and you're once again like, "Oh, I'm in the presence of greatness." It's amazing.
Not to mention the way I dress. So
it's a podcast, but he's wearing a suit. It's a full tux, very sharp, very, very sharp.
No, I'm actually supporting the Harvard Crimson, the Harvard Yale games coming up this weekend, and how we're recording. So. Go Harvard.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was this weekend. So, maybe
it's the 138th playing of the game. It's been going on for.
Oh, wow. And it's actually in Harvard this time, right? Or at Harvard this time?
At Harvard
Oh,
State.
awesome. Maybe I should swing by. Yeah.
Nice. Well, Mike, just jumping into it, in addition to all of those amazing accolades that Alex just talked about, tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be this person. Tell us where you grew up, what you were doing before business school.
Yeah, so I grew up in Denver, Colorado. I was born and raised there. An Italian-American family. My entire family, aunts, uncles, cousins, were all within like a 30-minute sphere. So very tight-knit. Not a lot of people went out of state. My older brother did, though, which encouraged me to kind of look out of state. I ended up being good at football because I was a big kid, 6 feet 4 inches. I was 285 pounds in high school. And I loved math and science, and I also loved football. So I actually had some really good coaches that encouraged me to look at the Ivy League. So that's how I ended up even looking at the Ivy League. And I ended up going to Harvard, like you guys mentioned. Did electrical engineering while playing football, which was an absolute perfect place for me. And like you mentioned, went off back to Colorado, got married to my high school sweetheart. Actually met Jessica in English class junior year, Mrs. Flanagan's English class. And we got married back in our hometown and lived there for another 4 years working. I was working in aerospace before going back to business school.
And
I didn't realize you guys had met way back then. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Yep. So Jessica actually also went to Tufts undergrad. So I'm actually a triple. If you really want to count them all, Alex, I'm a triple Harvard.
Oh my God, your Master's of Engineering.
Yeah, I did the MS MBA program. And Jess is a double jumbo. She got her undergrad and master's degree from Tufts.
Did you invite, was it Mrs. Flanagan to your wedding?
We should have. She's super sweet. She knows that we got married, but unfortunately, with that big Italian family, my third and fourth cousins got preference over some other invites.
Fair.
Completely fair.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more. You mentioned you were working in aerospace. Tell us a little bit more about like your headspace as you're working in aerospace, what you were doing, and when the thought of an MBA came to mind.
Yeah. So not to throw you guys off, but I actually originally got into the MBA through the 2+2 program. So I did my application in the spring, or I guess winter and early spring of my senior year at Harvard. For me, because I went through the 2+2 program and I knew I had the option to go back to the MBA anytime in the next 2 to 4 years, I had a decision to make when I started my career is, do I tell them, do I tell my new employer I have this option, and that because of that, I want them to put me in leadership roles or things like that. And I actually made the very intentional decision at that time to not tell them. I wanted to experience what life was as an engineer. So,
was your mindset actually like, by not telling them, I'm also living out this life of like, I could just say no to the 2+2 offer?
Exactly. Because in the back of my head, I was still thinking like, I don't necessarily know if I want to pivot away from the deep technical track. So that's why I thought it was really important that I let myself experience what it's like to be I'm saying real engineer, but like a engineer without the option of going to business school.
Yep.
I want to know what that felt like so that I could really kind of test, do I want to go down this technical route, or is an MBA really a better fit for me? And that worked, because about a year and a half in, I found myself getting like very squirrely and like asking to lead and like asking to make decisions and like getting more and more involved in non-engineering things. And that made it very clear to me that like leadership, if I have to choose between being the expert or being a leader, I want to be the leader.
And sorry. I was just going to ask, like, what about like being a leader in the engineering org? Was that something that, or like maybe it's like most of the leaders in engineering orgs do have an MBA background. I don't actually know that.
Yeah. So when I actually said yes, I'm ready to come to HBS. In my mind, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Cambridge, Boston for 2 years, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to be a program manager at my same company. That was my definition of success when I was coming in to HBS. And maybe that you can put this in as an answer later on too, but boy, did that change. So that really changed what I got exposed to through the business school program. Really changed that. And the last thing I'll say is the MS MBA program was created while I was in my deferment period. So
I was going to say, yeah.
I had to reapply, which no one applying now will have to go through this type of rigmarole, but I had to reapply to the MS MBA, and that allowed me to essentially not make the decision. So I got to still do both, which was a lot of fun.
And then, I mean, actually, we can touch a little bit more on it later, but you definitely pivoted hard to the entrepreneurship side of things while at business school. And I'm just curious if entrepreneurship was always in the back of your mind, like even back as a senior in college, when you were thinking of applying.
No, never really. And honestly, my definition of entrepreneurship was a lot more scoped to like running a small business of, call it 5 to 25 employees, which I think is a very successful type of entrepreneurship. But my definition of entrepreneurship in general got much more broad. And I really caught the bug. And met a bunch of really interesting people. And for me, it felt like I found like a real community and a real place for me and my skill set, because I'm such a weird guy. I like so many different things. I like to be working on a circuit board and soldering things together. And then I like to do a financial model once I learned how to do financial modeling. And I like to do pitch decks, and I like to sell, and I like to like go to a conference and speak. And like, where else can you do all those random different things than in the first couple of years of a startup? So it seemed really attractive to me.
You're a
Absolutely.
modern day Renaissance man. Leonardo da Vinci must be the Italian blood or something.
It must be. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse to have so many different interests. It's the same thing with my hobbies. Like, you know, I want to learn a language, learn an instrument, and like train to climb a mountain all at the same time, and just don't have time to do all those things.
Except if anyone could do it, it would be you. I am curious, how do you think, both in your application process, but also while you were at school, like how do you think your engineering tendencies and training impacted how you performed in the classroom? Do you feel like it helped, hindered? How did it show up, other than in sort of our Tom class, which is operations, and you certainly can see how that applied, but maybe more generally, how did the engineering mindset help you at business school?
Well, any chance we had to be analytical, I was right in my comfort zone. And a particular class comes to mind. It was a marketing class about, I think it was some music related business, and we got this huge data set. And I just was like, I loved it. I just chewed on the data set, and just magically, I actually got picked on that class. And I was able to share all my results. And it was like the one helpful comment I had in all of marketing. But that's when I was comfortable. But to kind of almost dodge your question, Julia, what I gained from business school was it pushed me out of that comfort zone.
I see.
Like, I'm so used to having all the data and the time to find the right answer, that the case method and business school forced me to have to pick an answer, to take a stance, to say something without having the time or the data.
It is also interesting, like in like the startup world where you are now, one, there's not as much data to work with, but sometimes the data set also, or like you could make multiple conclusions from it. So it's not like quite as black and white as maybe a former engineer would like. But
it's very uncomfortable, but it's also just super fun when things do work.
Yes.
So I'm an athlete, I'm a competitor, and like I feel like I get that same sort of exhilaration when things do work in this type of industry, I guess you could call it, that it satisfies some of that competitive edge that I don't get to satisfy anymore, that, you know, I'm not playing sports every day of the week.
So when you were thinking about how to tell your story of, you know, I'm an engineer who wants to get an MBA, what did you write your essay about, and kind of what resources did you use to do it?
Yeah, so my essay, I think, is going to be a little interesting for you and your listeners, because I took the stance of almost writing something that would look like it came from HBS. So what I did was I said, I wanted to connect the leadership and like self-evaluation skills that I got from playing college football. So things like game time decisions, like on the field decisions, watching film, like for every 2 hours of practice that we did, we watched 1 hour of film. So like immediate constant feedback and evaluation. And there was a couple other things too. I think there was like 5 total. And so I had 5 sections where I had a paragraph expanding on those things and how I learned them from playing college athletics, and how I wanted to apply them as a leader in the business world. And then at the top, I put a summary, a brief of the whole thing, the whole argument, in just one paragraph. And the last couple sentences were how HBS is going to be the place where I put all these puzzle pieces together and figure out how to do that. So I did that for a couple of reasons, that structuring. One was I really appreciated on the HBS website, and when I read example cases and stuff, that they do that they have like everything condensed. So if you're in a rush, if I don't know how admissions works, but I imagine that they open an essay and they're like trying to figure out what the essay is really quickly. And I wanted to just give it to them up front. And if they're trying to decide if they're going to read every word, they decided whether or not to read every word just by reading the first paragraph.
Wow.
So
that's creative.
It was, I tried to use structure instead of story.
Well
which
put.
Very engineering, which is very engineering of me.
And so, what were you gonna say? Oh, I was gonna ask, like, so you obviously were leaning more heavily into like, these are the leadership skills I have, and this process of evaluation that lends itself, or that basically shows like, yes, I have the capabilities of being like a great business leader. With some refinement that will come from HBS, hopefully. Did you touch on engineering at all, or were you kind of just like, you know what, my undergrad is going to speak for my technical skills?
I don't think I even mentioned engineering or my technical skills once in the essay, because my view of the application was that they're gonna, if they have a big table, they're gonna put out each piece and see, how is this interconnected? And is this well-rounded? And is this a student we want in our classroom? And I thought my resume like answered technical. Like,
I'm sure.
You know, the engineering degree, I got a minor in astrophysics, and while playing football. Like, I don't think I need to describe, and I was fortunate through, like, you know, you got a network. If anybody's listening, you got a network. I was fortunate to have internships every summer that were in engineering firms, and I got really good feedback from those. So like, I just knew that was covered with the resume. So everywhere else, I focused on trying to show them that like I was more than an engineer, and I want to be more than an engineer. I want to lead technical engineering organizations.
Yep. No, that's amazing. And I think for the listeners, that's a consistent theme, is use your real estate wisely. Right. You have different pieces. And I think the way that Mike just described, laying out all of the pieces and what does each piece say, is really wise. I also think the way you formatted and structured your essay showed something else that HBS really looks for, which is that you're going to come and you're going to show up prepared. And you're showing up prepared because you've read cases, you know what they're looking for, and you're actually sort of, not regurgitating, but showing that you've read it and that you've learned it, applying it to your own thing. To me, that is probably, I wonder how many students do that. I'm guessing not many.
Yeah. And I don't know, you guys can cut this, but for, I think 5 out of the 6 people that I've really helped, they've gotten in, and I've given them this advice for their essay.
We're keeping this in.
So I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, if they are impressed by that or not, but like, I think it's creative. It's a different thing. It at least is going to help you structure your argument, because you're kind of forcing structure on yourself. So yeah.
Were there elements in it? I mean, so I totally get the structure piece, and it makes sense a lot. And you mentioned early on, you chose structure over story. How did you think about also making sure that it was engaging to read at the same time? Do you feel like you did that as well?
So I think I chose to prefer it to be easy to read, which is very engineer of me. And, discount that, everybody, because I don't know, once again, I don't know which way's best, but it fit me, it fit my style, frankly. but there was still like, it wasn't completely dry.
Mhm.
Like I mentioned in that brief, I tried to tell a quick story, which was I've kind of been exposed to amazing leaders. I'm very fortunate that I had really good coaches. I had an excellent high school football coach that encouraged me to even leave Colorado and go to the Ivy League. And then I had an amazing head football coach at Harvard. Very rare. He's been there since 1993, if I have to
Oh,
date.
wow.
He's like an institution. He's an amazing developer of people, not just athletes. And I wanted to share some of the learnings that I got from these individuals, and that my ears are open, my eyes are open. Like I want to emulate these guys, but I'm not going to go be a head coach. I'm going to go create engineering organizations. And let's be honest, business isn't sports. I don't want to be one of those guys or gals that just says business is sports. And that's where the story was, is I'm going to take some of these skills and experiment with them. Once again, context 2 + 2. So I have 2 to 4 years. I'm going to take some of these skills, experiment with them in the real world. And then I'm going to come to HBS and hopefully hone those and also round out my skill set, because I didn't know what the time value of money was.
But he does
now. I learned how to do differential equations and all these crazy things, but I never learned how to, do debits and credits.
Right.
So,
right. Well,
yeah.
No, that makes sense. And I think the other thing that comes to mind, that if I'm sitting in an admissions office, what you're showing me with your essay, you just described that you basically are taking what you've learned over the course of 8 years, right? Your high school experience with your coaches and with college, and you're taking 8 years of knowledge and learnings and lessons, and you're distilling them into a small piece, which is from people who don't know about what an HBS class is like. You read a 40-page case, you have 30 seconds to make your point, right? And so Mike is essentially doing the same thing with his 8 years of experience. He's distilling it into the most compelling points for a reader. And so he's also showing an admissions officer exactly what he's going to do in the classroom.
And if you guys haven't listened to the Linda Lee episode, you should, because she has a absolutely stunning essay that is in a completely different direction than mine. So I encourage, if you're looking to apply to business school, look at different examples and find the one that feels like it fits you. Because if it fits you, it's going to be better.
Yeah.
If it fits you and your style and your personality, it's going to come across better no matter what.
Yeah. When you said, oh, that's not my style, or like you found something that was your style, I think that's so important. And like Linda's essay, for example, is very much her style. And so it works for her and comes across as genuine. And I remember I bought an HBS essay pack that had like 12 different essays in it. And one of them was an engineering one that was very straight to the point.
Yeah.
Arguably a little drier. But it's like, on what I had also heard was, hey, so I was someone who had an undergrad business degree. And so the question is more like, why do you even need another business degree? And there's more storytelling versus like, you don't even need to, it's like, yes, I have the technical skills. I've been working on the technical skills in my internships and job experience. And it's like the why business school is more obvious for an engineer in some ways. Or like,
Sure.
It's stuff, or yeah, like you didn't learn how to do a DCF model in electrical engineering, I'm assuming.
I was just going to say, Alex, you remind me of something I wanted to fit in, which is something I tell to folks that I'm advising, either getting into business school or like they're doing a startup and they've applied for a fund or an accelerator, is your success in this world is not defined by what you get accepted to. So if you just decide in your head that you're going to be successful and you want to go out and achieve something, like it's going to happen. And just that mindset alone is probably going to come through on your application. So it's going to increase your odds of getting into something. But I just think that that's a much better and frankly healthier way to view this whole process.
Yeah, you're kind of saying instead of I want a seat on the bus of of HBS, you can have a seat on the bus of Mike Mancinelli and where I'm going if you want to be part of this journey.
Definitely. Every applicant should have the mindset that the Harvard Business School, or you name the business school, they should want me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's your job to show them why. Because they can't know that if you just write your first and last name, unless you're like super famous. So I think that's a mindset everybody should take. But feel free to cut that.
No, I think it's like, I think confidence goes a long way. And to your point, it's like you're backing up the why. But I do believe in the power of like, you receive what you put out there. And if your like wavelength you're putting out there is like, yeah, I do, like, you should want me. And I also want to go there too. And I think this is a good relationship, and we're on like the same wavelength kind of, I think mindset is huge.
Yeah. It is. Well, and it also makes me wonder, Mike, like when you were doing this application, did you enjoy it? I guess is a question. Part of what I'm getting at is what we've heard in other interviews is I'm glad I did this, even if I didn't get in, because it helped me crystallize who I was and what I wanted to do. Was that your experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good forcing function for trying to just get your mind and goals and ambitions in order. Because I mean, this is a bulletin board for writing or journaling in general, but forcing yourself to get your thoughts organized down on paper or typing it out is just a really useful tool. So it helped me a lot, and it helped me get to that really simple decision tree that I just presented earlier, which is, do I want to be the expert or the leader? Before I boiled it down to that question, it was this whole swirl of like uncertainty and what can I do and what should my career look like? And it was just so much more intimidating until I boiled it down on paper to, do I want to be the expert or the leader?
That's honestly, well, great life advice for one, but like I think also awesome for people who maybe are struggling to figure out, what do I even write about? And it's like, yeah, if you can kind of start bucketing all of these thoughts that are going through your mind, and maybe they're conflicting, maybe they're not, but if you get them down on paper and start trying to like categorize them, you might end up finding it's a decision tree of 2, maybe three options. And you could even like craft an essay about that decision or like that thought process too. Which if
you guys want to talk process, I was looking it up earlier today. But I found some of my initial versions where I just had like bullet points, just like random things I wanted to talk about that I thought were compelling about me. I had like random things about hobbies. I had things about engineering and technical skills, and I had things about sports and leadership. And what I did was I pulled it out and once again, I'm very visual and very structural. So I kind of viewed those things and I grouped them. And I said, I want to pick one of these groups. And then it was back to, what group has not been addressed in my application so far?
Yep. So
I focused on that group. And then I started writing. And another piece of advice I have for the non-procrastinators and the procrastinators alike out there is to start writing immediately, and then like leave it alone for a week and come back. Leave it alone for a week, come back, leave it alone for a week, because then you ought to all of a sudden become your own editor.
Yep. No, it's also interesting. Like, I've done that before, and like, sometimes I come back and I'm like, oh yeah, this was better than some areas I was like, oh, this is better than I thought it was. And then in other areas, it's like, okay, yeah, like now a step removed, that's not getting across the point that I thought it was getting across. So exactly. Leaving enough time to do that though is very important. Yes. So it sounds like you had a good process in place. I'm curious, was this all self-driven, or did you have any resources in the application process?
So I have always, to my detriment, done things myself. So it was self-driven. I could have used resources that were readily available for me, and I should have. It would have taken a lot of stress and uncertainty off my shoulders. But I did all of this. I shouldn't say on my own, because I used friends, family to like help with bouncing ideas off of for the essay and other parts of my application, for talking through who my recommenders should be, those types of things. So I definitely didn't do this on my own, but I didn't use some of the more structured resources that I could have used.
Who did you have read your essay? Was it friends, family? And did you find the advice and input helpful?
Yeah, so I had my parents read it, which was very helpful, especially because I've done that a lot. So I've learned how to interpret their feedback. So that's another piece of advice, is try to like use the same people, because then you start to understand how their feedback's used. Because I also used a couple of my roommates that are still like best friends of mine. So it was very easy for me to like distinguish like, okay, I'll take that comment or I won't. And then back to the confidence piece is, even with all the feedback, I still wanted to make sure it was mine. Like, and make sure my style and my, I saved you guys from reading it out loud, but some of my sentences were a little clunky and things like that. But like, it was me. I wrote very conversationally, even though it was structured. I still write like that. But I didn't let my editors take that over, and it worked out.
I think that's another sign of a great essay, is if you read it, you're reading it now, how many years later, and you're like, yep, that's my voice. That's me. Maybe it's more refined now, but that's a sign that you were authentic, you stayed true, and you weren't embellishing, you weren't trying to be something you weren't.
Yeah.
Not to put you on the spot too much, and we can definitely cut it out if needed. I'm curious, could you just read, or if you have it handy, your first that intro paragraph that you talked about, and maybe the last sentence or two that you mentioned as well?
Let me open it. All right, you guys ready?
Ready.
Never so excited.
Okay. Over the past decade, I've been playing football, most recently for Harvard University as an offensive lineman. Football started as a fun activity with my neighborhood friends, and has evolved into a major component of who I am today. My continued involvement in football through my college career has not only given me valuable experience with time management and balancing interests, but also allowed me to attain other applicable skill sets as direct byproducts of the Harvard football culture. I have been amassing experience and skills in self-evaluation, coachability, decision-making, leadership, goal setting, and work ethic. So sorry, there were 6, all of which are pertinent to the business world, both in terms of traits a company should exhibit, as well as traits a successful individual, traits of a successful individual. Below, I expand on my experience with each of these critical traits. My pursuit of Harvard Business School is driven by my desire to continue to develop and refine these traits for use in leading the aerospace or energy industry. I am motivated to gain valuable skills, experience, and education that will build upon my experiences in athletics and construct the foundation for my future career as a leader and visionary.
Ooh.
So that was the brief. Maybe not quite as I described it earlier.
No, I love it. I think it hits exactly what you described.
So
to your point, it says what you're going to say, and the reader can continue to go on or not.
If they want to learn more about self-evaluation, coachability, on-the-field decision-making, leadership structure, goal setting, and work ethic, they can. And if they're like, this kid's a no, I've saved them time and they have some goodwill for me. Maybe my descendants will get in.
No, well, what I think is interesting about it, because if you're an admissions officer and you're getting this application from a college football player who also went to Harvard, one of the things you may be worried about for that individual, and I say this with knowing
Yeah.
this is not you at all, is this guy going to be full of himself, right? Because he's been the star of the show and at the best school in the world. And so if you go in with that and then you read your essay, and the words that stand out right away is your self-evaluation and coachability. You're talking about humility right
Yeah.
off the bat as the two biggest traits. And to me, if I'm an admissions officer, that immediately sort of speaks to your character and says, nope, that's not who this person is.
Yeah. And another thing, if they are football savvy, is that as an offensive lineman, I never caught a touchdown pass. I have no stats. The only time I get called out is if I mess up.
You're like the goalie of the team in some ways. I don't know anything about football.
Yeah.
It's a great point.
Like, I've always been in a position where like I'm there to support the team, and there's other people on the team that are getting the post-game interview, like, showing up on the jumbotron. Like if we're lucky, if there's enough time between the ad breaks, they show like the 5 offensive linemen's photos for 10 seconds. So that's probably why I got so many penalties too, is I like to hear my name over the loudspeaker.
Quarterback stuck in an O-line's body or something.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to veer off, but the last sentence or two, or I'm curious how you like ended up wrapping.
So that was it. So I have the sections, and there's no like wrap up. It's just done. I fit it to 2 pages exactly.
Beautiful.
You didn't need to. The wrap up would have just been a repeat of what you like did
I already
in the
said
intro
it.
anyway. Yeah.
I already said it. Like, my pursuit of Harvard Business School is driven by my desire to continue to develop and refine these traits. Like,
it's perfect.
Why do I need to say it again?
You don't. And it's also, if you're reading it, it's like, okay, I know how this guy's going to comment in class, and it's going to be the refreshing, to the point comment that doesn't drag on.
Maybe I delivered on that promise once or twice.
Consistently.
I felt like I was always like, I'm probably talking too much, but let me keep going.
No.
For what it's worth, your name does not stick out to me as someone who talked too much.
That was my goal.
Yes.
I'm so glad that that's
so definitely want to get into, or when you actually got to business school and what you got out of it and everything like that. But curious if you have any parting words of wisdom for 2+2 people specifically, or even people who got in and are trying to figure out if they want, or if now is the right time versus deferring. Just curious how you thought of because most people who do 2+2, I believe they take the full 4 years. Is that correct?
It tends to be that way. And, so 2 quick comments on that. The first one is for applicants to the 2+2 program. It is by nature of it more competitive, on a per student basis, than the general application. So if you don't get in, it's not the end of your journey. Once again, take that mindset of they need you, you don't need them. Keep going, crush the first couple of years of your career. And then if business school is still an attractive avenue for you, apply again. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that you're rejected from every business school forever. It doesn't even mean you're rejected from that particular school forever.
Yep.
So it's not the end of your journey. That start and end with that advice with anybody applying to 2+2. And then the second thing is, if you're accepted and you're in your career, once you feel like you've kind of stopped doubling responsibility over a 6-month period, mm-hmm. growing really quickly, learning a lot, taking on responsibility, that's when it's time. There should be no, your life post business school will just seem so different for a whole handful of reasons. A reason to not go is because you want to earn another 12 months of income. Mm-hmm. like it should be focused around learning. If you're not learning and growing very quickly, it's time to go back. It's time to go back to school.
Even good advice in terms of thinking of career pivots too, or like, is it time to move on from my current role at my current company and always be learning? So yeah, exactly. So you got, or you obviously chose to come, and chose to cut, or, you know, we're already married at this point. I'm curious, just like, and meanwhile, you were doing 2 degrees too. And so just curious, like, you know, what you got out of it, what you learned, any advice on like juggling so many things. And
Man, I got so much out of it. I mean, I could take up 60 minutes talking about what I got out of it. So let me jump to maybe the more interesting thing for people is that, you know, having a partner. You know, I was married. Those were some of my apprehensions going into the program. But I think at any of these business schools, especially the ones that you guys are targeting with this podcast, like there's a good community for partners. My wife at HBS felt immediately part of the community, part of the section experience, and in like a good way, not in like a creepy way. And she especially liked it once, you know, after like 3 or 4 months, friendships build that go beyond the talking about class that day. So as the partner that was in school, that was something that I had to manage, and I think was successful, was making sure that when she was there, we weren't just talking about school. Because there's no faster way of alienating someone in a conversation than people just talking about the class that they just took. So
great PSA.
Yeah. So and then the other thing that was very helpful for me and Jess was she was in a program that was even more intense than mine. Way more intense, maybe an order of magnitude. She was in the physician assistant program at Tufts University. And so she was super busy. So like, and we already had a deeply entrenched relationship. So it wasn't like we were building our relationship. So we were in a great place. We were very fortunate. So
is that why you're a Baker Scholar? Because you saw how many hours of homework she had and you're like, maybe I should put some more time into that appendix.
That definitely helped. And I would say this is probably advice people hear, but there's so many things that you can focus on at business school. There's the academics, there's the networking, and maybe an offshoot of that is the career search. There's travel and having a good time. And COVID helped reduce the travel for sure. And I like to have a good time, but with, you know, a small group of people, not in a crazy way. So I like super indexed on academics, and I was kind of weird about jobs. Like I went to, I think, 0 networking events. I just like, I didn't take advantage of that side of business school because I got so interested in building my own venture. So like I super indexed on academics, and that's why. I think anybody's capable of getting a Baker Scholar. They just happen to hand out that award to people that index on academics. They don't hand out the like best partier award. That's a shame. But
Alex and I would have been contenders.
Yeah.
Not as much as some of our classmates, but okay. And so and you pursued a couple different ventures, right? Or you want to?
Yeah. So freshman year.
Yeah, I do that all the time.
The first year, I was working with another MSMBA classmate on a software startup that was for instant feedback in the workplace. So we were doing almost like Spark or Pulse reviews and things like that. It was a fun startup, but we both just like weren't compelled enough in it to continue it. And then I got hooked up with one of our section mates and a couple guys at MIT, and we were building a drone robotics startup. which was a lot of fun. But man, we were probably a decade early.
Is
We're
this
trying
something
to
you'll
raise
go
some money
back
on
to?
it. Maybe.
Get some patents on whatever you did.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. Super like unique business school experience where the three other co-founders were all Japanese citizens, which is like, you know, as that kid growing up in Colorado who didn't think that he was going to go to school out of state, to just a few years later, like co-founding a company with three Japanese guys and doing drone robotics. Like that's what I was talking about earlier with like my definition of what I could do with my career just like totally changed in a way that I couldn't even imagine as that aerospace engineer that said, that clicked the box like, yes, I'm going to go.
Yep. No, it sounds like one of the pieces of advice when I was applying, and I asked why go to business school, and he just said like it's like a camera lens. You open your aperture of what's possible by like 4 or 5x, right? And so that's kind of what I'm hearing from you is like you couldn't have dreamed that you couldn't have said this is what I'm going to go do at business school because it showed you paths that you didn't even know existed.
Yeah, which is super cool. But Julia and Alex, I'm sure as you know, when you open that aperture, it can be blinding.
Oh yeah.
Indeed.
So,
you thought you had a lot of decisions back when you were writing that application essay. Then absolutely. And I'm curious, or like, I don't know. I feel like everyone gets a little overwhelmed with like all the things that they could be doing, both in terms of how to spend their time, but even like career. How did you navigate those decisions?
Yeah, I mean, that was another place where having my partner with me was super helpful because she's just such like a rock for me and supportive of what I want to do. And very quickly I said, like, I want to try to create a venture. Like, I feel like that's the best use of my skill set. It's the best way to try to like really be a leader, like in the rawest way. It may not be the best way to like pay off the loans we just incurred. And I'm also not much of a gambler. So like the whole like idea that the startup thing could like lead to a big payout is actually not why I'm in it. Like, so there's a little bit of a mismatch there that maybe we'll diagnose when I'm 40 years old and you know, living in a 1-bedroom apartment somewhere. But sorry, I digress.
We'll have you back on the podcast for that episode.
Yeah. So for me, it was just like, for some reason, I did not plan this at all. Very soon in, I got latched onto the idea of entrepreneurship, and I almost put blinders on. I was like, I don't need to go to the career fair or to this consulting event or even to like when engineering or aerospace companies came to campus or offered jobs, I didn't apply. Once again, to the confidence piece, which I don't always practice what I preach. I just want to say this, like, I'm not confident all the time. Like, but when it came to career, I was like, if at any point these startups fail and I do need to go get some job to pay the bills, those companies are going to be there. I'm going to be able to apply. Probably some of my friends will be in these companies and I can help network into them. Like, it's going to be fine.
And you'll land higher than you would have otherwise. Like, I feel like that's what I learned in like the entrepreneurial failure class. You know, like you land in, you know, a couple years ahead of if you had just started there right out of school.
Did I ever tell you that? So that was with Tom Eisenman, right?
Yep.
So that class, he was a co-chair of the MSMBA. So when he published his book, Why Startups Fail, he gave each of us a book.
Oh, nice.
And he signed it for everybody. And he had slightly different notes. And for me, it said, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he's like, I can't wait to write a chapter on you.
Oh, that's hilarious.
He didn't actually write that. Julia, that was a joke.
Oh, I'm so gullible. And
I thought it was like you guys have like a good sense of humor and that he's like,
Yeah,
like ribbing you.
Julia
That's
took that so
hilarious.
serious.
well, I believe that because I just believe in you. Is that such a bad thing?
Oh wait, here's what he actually said. He said, "But if you fail, fail well." And then in parentheses, he said again.
Yeah.
Because this was a couple weeks after we shut the drone robotics company down.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a little bit of a jab, not quite as blatant as I just
That was so fun. Sorry, I truly, I'm very gullible. You're very believable. But and it will not distract me from a point that I was going to make, which was, I think it's when people think about going to business school, it's like, oh, well, it can be this skyrocket to success and this opportunity. But reality, what you're describing is a different way of looking at business school is the ultimate insurance policy. You can go do and try anything, but the net to catch you of where you can go, to your point, it's if this startup doesn't work, your net's right there. So leap as high as you want because that net has gotten raised now, and will catch you.
To use the like skyrocket analogy, I almost view it as business school gives you the key code to hundreds of different launch pads.
Mm.
And you need to go over and hit the code and go into it, and then start your skyrocket and whatever little thing you're going to go into, because like there's a lot of memes and jokes out there about MBAs, and the reason that they're funny is there's some truth in it. That when we go into some specialty, whatever it is, relative to someone that's been in that specialty for 6 months, we know nothing.
Yep.
But we have the capability to learn extremely quickly and to bring a lot of value extremely quickly. And we have context of so many things that a lot of folks that didn't have this educational background don't have. So that's our advantage. But like this illusion that if you go through business school, you're going to be like ready to be the head of and make every decision. I think that's going from confidence to hubris.
Yes. Yes. It's a line you don't want to get near.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Also, your launch pads and your codes. Are you an engineer or something? Yeah.
We can do a lock and key if you want. More romantic.
This one's about you.
And so I believe this was done before the first recording, but would love if you shared a little bit about what you're up to now and what you did right after graduating and then ultimately pivoting.
Yeah, so right after graduation, I actually decompressed. And you guys can cut this, but I tracked down a cargo van, retrofitted it to be a camper van.
Oh, nice.
And I drove it across the country with my dog Malt while my lovely wife was still suffering in her graduate program. So drove from Massachusetts to the Oregon coast and back. We were on the road for 31 days. It was awesome.
Holy cow. Wow, that's sick.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then I got a job with a post-Series A startup through actually Caroline's husband, Bobby.
Oh, yeah.
Bobby's brother.
Oh,
and you
nice.
can call this too. Let me just restart because that was way too much. But I got a job at a post-Series A startup called Highland. They sell electric school buses as a service. So I was flying around the country the last year, pretty much, helping them sign up school districts to make the transition from diesel buses to electric, which is a lot of fun. I got to meet a lot of people, and it was just the type of thing I'm looking for in entrepreneurship. I got to do everything from trying to sell and like negotiate a 7-figure contract with a school district, to financial modeling and doing like underwriting type stuff, to like creating one-pagers and like doing some like marketing things. And so it was a good stretch and stress test of some of the things I learned in the MBA. And then very quickly, I was ready to start my next venture. So my college roommate and best friend, Adam Redman, we played offensive line together in Harvard undergrad. And then he went and played in the NFL for 6 years, a couple of those years with the Cowboys. So him and his wife and son, Walter, have set up camp in Dallas, Texas, and convinced my wife and I to move over to Texas, and we started a business together. So we are running a business. I won't even tell you the name of it because we need to change it. Trademark issues, but it's a sports technology startup helping athletic departments define the performance and health data of their athletes.
That's amazing.
And so you'll be selling to schools, or like maybe the same schools that you sold the electric buses
Yeah,
to?
so that our part of our strategy right now is to sell to school districts and colleges, and in the form of an annual contract, if anybody's interested, as opposed to trying to go out and sign up individuals, for like, for example, $8 a month subscription. That's a steep road to climb.
Oh, for sure.
So we're going more the B2B route, and think it's actually bringing a lot of value to some of these higher level stakeholders in these organizations.
Amazing.
So, yeah, I get to use some of the skills I got from Highland with this new startup, which is great.
If you guys do go D2C, we will air your ads, revenue, like for free. We'll do podcast ads for you.
Because we have like a lot of demand for that right now.
Yeah.
We'll pay. We always pay.
It's confidence, Alex. Are you listening to what
true.
Mike's told us? We're inviting him on the bus.
That is so true. That is
we'll
so
sign
true.
an agreement to pay, but we'll ask to defer the payment for many, many months.
Yeah.
until we hit a volume of listeners that would warrant it. That sounds right. Well, Alex, do you think we should hop to some rapid fire?
Yeah. You want to kick it off, Julia?
Yes. So first rapid fire. What is, and you have double the experience with Harvard. What is a stereotype about Harvard Business School specifically here that is true and one that is not true?
One that is true is that it is a top academic institution. Like I said, I indexed very heavily on academics, and I learned a lot. Their materials are excellent, especially now that I'm out of it and trying to relearn some things. I didn't save all my cases and things like that, and I'm regretting it. Now, myth that's false. I don't want to go with like the one that everybody talks about, like that people are snobby jerks.
That's pretty much the one that we've heard from everyone else. So that's good. Yep.
I feel like there's got to be another one. Okay, how about this one? There's a myth that Harvard doesn't have a football team. They do. And they've produced a lot of good football players. So this is actually a fun fact. My senior year of undergrad, there's 5, for those of you who don't know, there's 5 starting offensive linemen, and 4 of them went on to play enough years in the NFL to earn a pension. I was the 5th that did not go to play in the NFL.
Wow. I did not realize that. That's a good myth to dispel.
Yep.
I'm curious, who do you think is the coolest alumni or class guest that you got to meet?
I mean, the obvious one is First Different Unique. No Definish, which is Jean-Claude Bouvert.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to be honest, the person that came to mind, I don't even remember his name before him, was the Apex boot guy.
Oh my gosh, that's a good one.
Not because I liked him, not because I was necessarily, or maybe let's edit that I didn't like him, but The Apex boot guy was interesting to me because he was our first guest that just really aggressively disagreed with any comments that we made.
Yes.
And it just, for me, was an opportunity for me to observe maybe how I should act if I'm ever in the fortunate position to be a guest like that, or how not to act.
Yes.
Yes, the students might not be assholes. Some of the guests are. Is where we can leave that. The other takeaway from that one, like as much as he was unpleasant, is the maybe more PC way to phrase it, is from a marketing opportunity. He was pretty smart because he got up there and he said, we'll give you, I think it was like 50% off boots. And I remember going to house parties and suddenly there were all these boxes of Apex boots from people who had taken out student loans and were using it to pay for new ski boots. So he wasn't, he had something up there that he was thinking about.
For sure. What would you say was your most embarrassing moment during business school?
I feel like I should ask you guys.
Nothing.
I don't know. I mean, there were moments when I made comments in class and I was just like so uncomfortable or like scared of what I had just said that like I almost like blacked out and like the comment just finished. And like once the attention moved to the other side of the room, I'd lean over to like seatmates at the time and be like, what did I just say? Did I say something just like, hopefully I didn't say anything offensive or like that could have been misinterpreted, but I'm sure that happened a few times. Which is what's really nice about the HBS classroom is for the most part, our classmates were very forgiving of people kind of trying to explore their thoughts in a very intense environment.
And that agree.
Quick plug, my former seatmate, Pip Jones.
Yeah.
Now a mayor-elect, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Exactly. We don't need the coolest class guest or speaker. We have we have a mayor who sat in the room with us.
Let me take everything back and edit my answer to, you said, who is my favorite Harvard alum or guest? It's Philip Jones, the mayor-elect of Newport News, Virginia.
Yeah. And he absolutely crushed it, like in terms of, raising money and just like turnout, like he absolutely crushed it.
Yeah.
It is. And it's funny that you bring it up because I think it's like explains the dichotomy of you both are surrounded by these people who are so amazing, who literally a couple months a year out of school are, running for mayor and breaking records. But also everyone is sitting in that classroom describing what Mike just said is like blacking out during comments because they're worried and everyone is fighting those same insecurities. But you've got people who are incredibly humble and also going on to do big things. Yeah.
But also those uncomfortable moments, it's like teaching, it's just exposure therapy almost. So you're more comfortable with being uncomfortable so that, when an investor is putting you on the spot and you say a response and you're like, I blacked out, but it's probably okay.
Exactly.
So maybe one last rapid fire question. I know these aren't super rapid. Both for your undergrad and your business school, if you had to pick a new mascot for Harvard, what would it be?
I would just put a "the" in front of Crimson.
Okay.
The Crimson. I mean, the reason this hasn't been rapid fire is because I can't help myself. And I think the fact that Harvard's mascot is Crimson is super cool because they're so old that they didn't even know what like mascots were supposed to be when they were like, we're the Crimson. And they're so confident in who they are. Let's bring this back. They're so confident in who they are. They're like, I don't need to pick a mascot. Look at Yale. They picked the Bulldogs. They sold out.
It's true.
Harvard's, we are confident we're the Crimson and it's going to stay that way.
And to reference something else you said, or well, you're talking about how you put on the blinders and like you just have to focus on like what you're trying to get out of things and like tune out the noise. And Harvard's like, we've got other stuff to deal with other than choosing an animal mascot.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And haven't you seen that man or girl who dresses up in the full Crimson like suit?
I don't actually
That's
know if I have.
Well, yeah, because you guys got to go to the game.
Yeah.
I went to Harvard Yale, but I can't. I was really working hard on achieving that other award we were talking about, which was best partier. So I don't have a great memory of the event.
Yeah.
Well,
on that lovely note, it has been such a pleasure to talk to you. Before we wrap, is there anything that you feel like you wanted to say to prospective students, people thinking about an MBA, actively applying, that you feel like you didn't get to say that you want to tell them?
No, I snuck it in that your success is not defined by acceptance to a program, an award, anything like that. Your success is defined and it starts up in your head and your intention, and it'll happen.